morning, members of the commission. My name is John Clark, and I am here today representing the Gary Chicago International Airport Authority. And I was told to be fairly brief, but comprehensive in my report to you. So I thank you for the opportunity. I have been on board with the Gary Airport Authority now for about a year. And I was brought on to the authority to help initially with business development and to give advice on capital program and just operations in general. So this morning I want to take an opportunity to just give you an update on both the expansion and a project that I think is going to prove out to be very beneficial in terms of not only the airport's development opportunities, but the impacts for the development opportunities around the airport, and that's a public-private partnership. So first of all, the Runway project, I think you all are aware, it's a $166 million project, budgeted at $166 million. It is a project that is being funded primarily by the FAA, the RDA, and then local match money. As the project has gone along, I'm sure you all have heard there's been a few bumps, but in this business, that is to be expected. So what is taking place at this point with the project is most of the construction work has been completed. It was discovered, I would say a month ago, but it was discovered that there is more contamination than what was anticipated when the project began. And like any project, when you start digging in the ground, you never know what you're going to find, even with the best estimates out there. So in this case, there was some additional contamination, more than what was anticipated. There are all of the right agencies sitting at the table on a weekly basis trying to resolve this issue. Based on these meetings and discussions, the new projected date, if you will, to complete the project is September 2014. If there's any way to reduce that time frame, we will most certainly do that. So as the project continues, there has been an effort to work with the railroads because not only is there dealing with the contamination, there has to be new agreements formed with the railroads, because as you are aware, part of the project is to realign the rail in order to accommodate the extension. But just so that everybody is clear and understands the project to its real essence, if you will, the project is more about relieving an aeronautical obstruction for the flight path than it is about extending the runway. If you are familiar with that area, the berm which the tracks sit on, that's fine. But when there is a train on the tracks, it penetrates the surface, the transitional surfaces for landing and takeoff. So the real essence of the project, which the FAA defined many years ago, was how do we remove this obstruction? With the wisdom and foresight of the airport authority and the community, the decision was if you're going to do that, go ahead and extend the runway. So the most critical element of the project, I just want to be clear, is the removal of the obstruction. The actual completion date that was established, technical completion date, is 2015. There was an initiation to get this done, if you will, ahead of schedule and clearly within budget. The initial target date was to be done by December of 2013. So while it's disappointing that we're not going to hit that particular date, we are still within the range of what was considered acceptable time by the FAA in completing the project. So I will share with you this morning. The good news is that we have all the right people at the table to resolve this issue on the contamination, the environmental impact issues, as quickly as we possibly can. The more exciting news is beyond the runway extension is the exploration and hopefully the creation of a public-private partnership. The question was asked, okay, so once you get the runway project done, then what? What happens? Are we in a position then to just immediately have more air service, immediately have more activity? So what has been determined is in order to really try to leverage this public asset, the airport, it was how do we bring in private investment, begin to reduce the amount of public investment in this public asset without truly privatizing. And so between the board and the mayor, Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson, in early March, they convened and determined that they would create an ad hoc committee for the purpose of exploring a public-private partnership. The challenge that that committee was given was not only to explore it, but to explore it within 60 days. Clearly, we're a long ways from 60 days today. But the original members are David Bognosky, Cornell Collins, Kerry Heitman, Marion Johnson, Pastor Marion Johnson, Bo Kemp, and Harley Snyder. And the intent was to have some board representation, but some outside representation. The ad hoc committee work continues today. Through that process, the ad hoc committee explored various models of public-private partnerships. What became very clear through this process was there was not an interest to privatize the airport, take away the control of a local oversight. So the model that the ad hoc committee ultimately came to the board and made a recommendation on was to keep the board structure the same. Underneath that, create a process that would go out and solicit for private interests to manage and invest in both the airport and properties outside of the airport. So if you're familiar with the airport development zone, this area is the area that is targeted for not only the airport development, but development that would support an extended airport operation. And so the ad hoc committee has put forth a solicitation process that has invited interests outside and inside, so both locally, regionally, nationally, and even internationally. And the idea was, how do you make sure that you keep a level of public control, public involvement? How do you entice private investment and private management, trying to take full advantage of the motivations of a private interest? So in proceeding, the ad hoc committee came up with pillars, and those pillars are listed up here, and that is maintain ownership, job creation, long-term strategic community and regional partnership, the ability and willingness to maximize capital investment, development and sustainability of the airport from an environmental, economic, and social standpoint. So the ad hoc committee adopted these as pillars. They presented that to the board and to the mayor, and that was approved. And so as the process continues, those pillars begin to drive how they go about the solicitation and what they're looking for in the responses. So what they determined are, these are the expected outcomes as a result of creating a public-private partnership. There was a comprehensive analysis done. We brought in financial people. We brought in companies that have had experience in managing airports. We brought in the FAA. We wanted to make sure we were covering the gamut because there are a lot of various models on how to create public-private partnership. I think you all are familiar with what is going on in Chicago with Midway. Public-private partnership, but more on the privatization versus keeping really the public engaged in the oversight. So it was very clear and still remains clear that today that this will be a true public-private partnership. In framing, what has taken place at this point is there was an initial solicitation to request interest and qualifications. We had 8 companies that submitted interest, including international representation, and we were all excited about the response. Now, in this, it was not required that you present to the authority, to the ad hoc committee, a statement of interest in order to compete for the request for proposal. So the plan is to take that information. Like I said, we wanted to gather information from the marketplace and then create a request for proposal. The request for proposal will then allow the ad hoc committee to evaluate more formally the responses and the commitments to both a management agreement and the ability to invest in both the airport and properties outside of the airport. What's really key to this relationship is that there is the formation of an economic development agreement being formed between the City of Gary and the Airport Authority, because the interest is not only driving the development of the airport, but driving development around the airport and in the greater region. And so with that, there is now working between the city and the Airport Authority a draft economic development agreement. And the significance of that is to recognize that the airport can be a key catalyst in driving peripheral development. And so we want to make sure that as this development occurs, that there is cooperation, an agreed upon cooperation, even to the point where there is opportunity to address zoning, opportunities to address shared services. And the question could be easily asked, well, can't you do that through simply an MOU? But what we're hoping for is to be able to recognize that as the airport grows, as that area grows, there are going to be more services required, and we are working so that the airport and the city can jointly provide their services during a period of growth. There is an appraisal process currently going on, and the reason for the appraisal process is we want to determine what the value of the land and improvements are at the airport, what the value of the land and improvements are of some of the areas surrounding the airport. And why is this important? It's important because as we go through the RFP process and we begin to have the opportunity to negotiate with a private partner, we understand what the value is, and they understand. Clearly that will be challenged. There will probably be challenge of discounting because there are certain restrictions related to the airport, but it gives us a base. Not only does it give us a base for negotiating and working with a private company, it also gives us a base for setting the platform for raising, if you will, the level of our rates and charges for the airport. So it's dual purpose. The most significant piece of where this project is and where the public-private partnership is that the airport runway extension in and of itself doesn't drive the development and the use of the airport. The runway extension does allow the capacity and the true value of the asset to be realized. As long as the berm is there, then you retard the growth. You remove the berm, you extend the runway, and the airport truly becomes a regional airport, meaning that with that extended runway, you can literally have service across the pond to Europe. You can reach any destination within the U.S. And so it really positions the airport as truly a third commercial service airport for the greater Chicago, Northern Indiana region. And so we're excited about the opportunity to have the private interest in the airport matched with the public interest in the airport to drive not only the growth in the management of the airport, but the growth of the surrounding